The morning was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as Emma Collins stood by her kitchen window, cradling a warm mug of coffee, watching the maple tree outside sway gently in the wind while thinking about how peaceful her neighborhood always felt before the world woke up. The birds chirped softly, the distant hum of a passing car echoed faintly, and the old wooden floors beneath her feet creaked in rhythm with her thoughts, which drifted back to years of routine mornings, the same breakfast, the same coffee, and the same quiet she had grown to expect since her husband had passed 3 years ago, leaving her alone but not lonely, just careful about how she let people in, yet always open to small kindnesses. And then came the knock, soft but deliberate, and it was enough to startle her, making her heart skip a beat because it was early, too early for visitors, and the sound had a hesitation to it, a weight she immediately sensed, a presence that carried more than just a casual greeting. She set her mug down carefully, as if not wanting to spill the comfort she felt in it, and walked to the door, adjusting her cardigan as she tried to steady the fluttering of her heart, and when she opened it, she saw Daniel Harris standing there, the neighbor's son, now a man but still the same quiet boy she had watched grow up across the street, his eyes avoiding hers as if he carried a secret too heavy to speak, his shoulders tight, his expression cautious and uncertain, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to pause, the air between them thick with unspoken words, as Emma struggled to find the right greeting, finally managing a simple, "Hi, Daniel," and he nodded slightly, voice low, almost breaking, saying, "I was hoping, maybe we could talk," and she stepped aside without thinking, a small gesture that said more than words could, inviting him in while sensing the gravity of what was coming, and as he entered, she noticed the careful way he moved, the way he hesitated at the threshold, like he was bracing himself for something he didn't know how to deliver, and Emma's heart thumped with a mixture of curiosity and concern, remembering how he had been a part of her life in small, gentle ways, helping carry groceries, stopping by to chat when the air was crisp, offering quiet smiles that lingered just a second too long, leaving impressions that were subtle but undeniable. She motioned to the kitchen table, where sunlight streamed in through the window, casting warm patterns on the wooden surface, and they both sat, him gripping a mug of coffee she had offered, though not drinking, his fingers tied around it as if it anchored him while his mind raced, and she watched him, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his gaze kept dropping to the table, the slight tremor in his hands, sensing that this was not a casual visit, that whatever he came to say had been brewing for days, maybe weeks, carrying with it a weight he could no longer contain alone. Emma tried to smile reassuringly, letting him know she was there to listen, that her kitchen had always been a safe place for conversations, and Daniel finally took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as if letting out a fraction of the burden he had been carrying, his voice quiet, shaky, yet earnest, as he admitted he hadn't planned to come but felt he would regret it forever if he didn't speak, and as he spoke, Emma felt a flicker of recognition, a hint that the boy she had known had grown into someone carrying emotions he struggled to name, someone trying to reconcile his feelings with the reality of life, someone who had come here because he trusted her judgment, her presence, her ability to hold space without judgment, and she felt a sudden surge of warmth and protectiveness, wanting to ease his burden, wanting to help him speak the words that clung so heavily to his heart. And as the morning light shifted and the room filled with a quiet tension, Emma realized that this simple knock, this hesitant visit, might mark a turning point, not just for Daniel, but for her as well. Because in that pause between silence and speech, something intimate, vulnerable, and human had begun, and she understood that she was about to witness a truth that would change the rhythm of her mornings, the way she understood connection, the way she saw the young man who had grown before her eyes, carrying not just the weight of his own life, but the unspoken hope that she could understand him, and as he finally looked up, meeting her eyes briefly, she saw fear, hope, longing, and uncertainty all mixed into one, and she knew that the conversation about to unfold would not be easy, but it would be necessary, and in that quiet kitchen, with the sunlight painting golden lines across the table, the moment hung between them like a fragile thread, fragile but real, and Emma took a steadying breath, ready to listen, ready to understand, ready to be present as Daniel's heart spilled into words, and in that instant, the ordinary morning became extraordinary, charged with emotion, with expectation, with the unspoken promise that what began with a knock could become something profound, something neither of them could predict, and as she gestured for him to sit more comfortably, she felt the weight of her own curiosity and the gentle pull of empathy, realizing that sometimes life arrives in small, quiet packages, that mornings can hold secrets, and that the next words spoken would carry more meaning than the sunlit room could contain, a beginning wrapped in hesitation. Waiting for courage to fill the space between them, and Emma, heart open, mind alert, knew she was ready to meet that moment fully, to hear the words, to witness the truth, to embrace the unspoken bond that had drawn them together. And as the wind shifted outside, rustling the maple leaves, the world seemed to hold its breath along with her, waiting for the revelation Daniel had carried across the threshold. Knowing that in that delicate instant, everything could change, Daniel and Emma sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming in through the window catching the edges of his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw and the subtle worry in his eyes, and for a moment, neither spoke, the silence stretching long enough to feel heavy but comforting, the kind of silence that lets unspoken thoughts settle before they demand attention. And then Daniel finally took a deep breath, the kind that seemed to carry months of unsaid words, and started carefully, as if weighing every syllable against the fragility of the moment, telling Emma that he hadn't planned to come but had realized he couldn't leave without saying something, that the truth inside him had grown too large to keep bottled up, and Emma nodded slightly, encouraging him to continue, feeling that familiar mix of curiosity and concern that always stirred whenever he opened up, because she had seen him struggle with life's small and large burdens before, and now, the stakes felt different. Charged with an emotional honesty she hadn't expected this morning, Daniel's voice wavered slightly as he admitted he was moving to Seattle for a new job, a fresh start, a new life far from the streets and houses he had known all his life, and hearing those words, Emma felt a sharp, unexpected ache, a prick of something she hadn't realized was there, a mix of sadness and longing that made her heart tighten in her chest, not because she wanted to stop him, but because the thought of him leaving carried a weight she had underestimated, a reminder of how important he had quietly become in her life over the years, how his presence had grown into a comfort, a steadying force that she hadn't labeled but that she knew was significant. Daniel leaned forward slightly, gripping his mug as if it were an anchor, and confessed that leaving was complicated, that he had wrestled with feelings he couldn't quite name, feelings that were part gratitude, part admiration, part something deeper he hadn't dared confront until now. And as he spoke, Emma listened with rapt attention, feeling the warmth of his honesty, the courage it took to voice emotions that were messy and delicate, and she realized that this wasn't just about a job or a move, it was about connection, about acknowledging the unspoken ties that had formed quietly over time, about the small kindnesses and shared moments that had built something meaningful between them without either realizing it fully, and she felt a strange mix of pride and tenderness toward him, remembering all the little ways he had checked in on her, laughed at her small jokes, and offered quiet support when she hadn't even asked for it, and now, those memories took on a new hue, colored by the vulnerability he carried across the table in front of her. Daniel's hands tightened around his mug, his voice dropping to a whisper as he admitted that he hadn't known how to express these feelings, that he had been scared of overstepping, of being misunderstood, but the thought of leaving without sharing even a piece of his heart was unbearable. And Emma felt a lump form in her throat, realizing that what he shared was not just words, but a trust, a bridge to something she had been feeling but had never allowed herself to admit, and in that moment, the kitchen seemed smaller, warmer, the outside world fading away, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of fragile honesty, where every glance, every breath, every hesitant word mattered deeply, and she could sense the longing in him, the way he wanted acknowledgement, understanding, and connection, the same things she had secretly wished for in quiet moments, the things that made mornings like this feel alive and heavy with possibility. Emma finally spoke, her voice calm but steady, telling him that she appreciated his honesty, that sharing these truths, even when difficult, was important, and she watched his shoulders relax just slightly, the tension in his face softening, the weight he carried seeming a little lighter now that it had left his chest and entered the safe space of her listening heart. And as he continued, he spoke of gratitude, of remembering how she had been there for him over the years, how her patience and gentle presence had shaped moments he now realized were meaningful, small gestures that had anchored him when life felt chaotic, and Emma felt a surge of warmth, a recognition that the impact she had made on someone's life could be profound without fanfare. That kindness given freely could create deep bonds that neither time nor distance could erase. and in that warmth, she noticed the subtle shift in him, a flicker of hope, a vulnerability that was beautiful in its courage, a willingness to open up despite fear, and she admired it quietly, feeling her own emotions stirring in ways she hadn't anticipated, because listening to someone bare their heart like this was a rare gift, and she understood now how much she had missed having this kind of closeness, this emotional honesty, this connection that made the heart ache with meaning. Daniel leaned back finally, a small sigh escaping him, as if he had spent months holding his breath and could now let it go a little, and Emma noticed the way his eyes flicked to hers, searching, questioning, silently asking if the bond they shared mattered to her too, if she felt the same quiet recognition of connection that he had spent so long carrying alone, and she found herself nodding, not with words, but with a certainty in her gaze, because she knew, deeply, that the history between them, the shared moments, the unspoken understanding, the laughter and the care, had built something lasting, something that didn't need to be named immediately, something that could exist simply as truth between two hearts, and Daniel smiled faintly, a small, almost shy curve of his lips that lit up his face, and in that smile, Emma felt the fragile beauty of confession, the tenderness of a heart laid bare, the delicate courage it took to show vulnerability to someone who mattered, and the room felt lighter somehow, the sunlight warmer, the morning brighter, even as the weight of his impending move lingered, a bittersweet reminder that life was full of beginnings and endings, that choices carried consequences, and that emotions, once felt, could not be unseen. They sat together, drinking coffee but neither really tasting it, because the conversation had taken them somewhere deeper, to a place where honesty mattered more than small talk, where connection was measured not by words alone but by presence, by the willingness to stay even when it was difficult, by the courage to reveal what one carried inside, and Emma realized that mornings like this, unexpected and heavy with emotion, were rare, that the universe had a way of delivering truth when it mattered most, and she felt a mix of gratitude and anticipation, a flutter of excitement tempered by concern, because while Daniel's words had opened a door, they had also reminded her that life was fragile, that love and longing existed in quiet moments, and that the act of sharing, truly sharing, could transform ordinary mornings into something unforgettable, and as they finally paused, neither speaking immediately, Emma knew that the bond between them had shifted, that something tender had begun, something real and delicate, and that the morning had already become a memory she would carry, a moment of intimacy, of understanding, of shared heartbeats, of courage and vulnerability that marked the beginning of a story neither of them fully understood yet, but both felt in every glance, every breath, every hesitant word that lingered in the kitchen air, a story of connection, honesty, and the quiet, profound recognition that some feelings, once revealed, could never be forgotten, and Emma felt a soft thrill, a mixture of hope and longing, knowing that the next steps, whatever they were, would be guided by this newfound honesty, by the courage to speak, by the courage to listen, by the courage to simply feel together. The moment hung between them, thick with unspoken tension, as Daniel's eyes met Emma's and lingered with a weight that made her heart tighten, the kitchen around them fading into quiet shadows, and for a heartbeat, she saw all the years he had been more than a neighbor's boy, all the small gestures, the laughter across fences, the quiet conversations that had grown into something neither of them had named, and Daniel's voice broke the silence, low and hesitant, admitting that the truth he carried had started as a feeling he couldn't understand, a mix of admiration, care, and longing that had grown steadily until it became impossible to ignore, and Emma felt a sudden rush of recognition, a warmth spreading through her chest as she realized she had felt the same pull, the same steady tug toward him, in ways she had carefully ignored, told herself were simple familiarity, and yet now, hearing him speak, it was undeniable, undeniable and fragile, like a candle flame in a breeze, precious and easily lost. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, fingers curled around his coffee cup though he hadn't taken a sip, and confessed that he had tried to convince himself these feelings were just admiration, just gratitude, just comfort, but he could no longer hide from the truth that he cared in ways that scared him, that made every goodbye feel too long, every smile linger too deeply, and Emma listened, heart pounding, realizing that every small moment she had shared with him, the evenings after work when he stopped by, the help with groceries, the quiet chats about life, the way he remembered small details about her, had meant more than she had admitted even to herself, had built a connection so subtle that she hadn't noticed its gravity until now, until he laid it bare before her, and in that confession, the kitchen seemed to hum with electricity, the air thick with possibility, and she felt a mixture of longing, surprise, and something tenderly thrilling, the kind of emotion that makes you hold your breath and lean a little closer. Without even realizing it, Daniel swallowed hard, voice breaking slightly as he admitted he didn't expect her to respond in any particular way, that he didn't even know if sharing this truth was fair, and Emma's eyes softened, her lips curved in a gentle, understanding smile, because she knew that fairness didn't always apply in matters of the heart, that honesty and courage were far more important than perfect timing, and she felt a strange, delicious ache knowing he had trusted her with this, that he had chosen her to witness his vulnerability, and it made her chest ache in a way she hadn't expected, a mix of longing and protectiveness and a quiet, simmering hope that perhaps, in this unexpected moment, something new could begin. He admitted that leaving for Seattle was difficult not because of the distance, not because of the job or the city, but because it meant leaving behind the quiet moments, the conversations that had become anchors in his life, the familiarity of her presence, and Emma felt the sting of his words, realizing how much she valued him, how much she would miss him, how much she had secretly come to depend on his laughter, his careful attention, the subtle ways he showed he cared, and she wanted to reach across the table, to reassure him, to tell him that she understood, that she felt it too, that the bond they shared was rare, precious, and not something easily broken by miles or time, yet she held back, letting him speak, letting him own his truth, because this was his moment, his vulnerability, and she could support him simply by being present. The sunlight shifted, casting patterns across the table, and Daniel's voice softened as he admitted he didn't know how to move forward, that the idea of leaving carried both excitement and fear, and he looked at her, eyes wide, silently asking for acknowledgement, for some hint that she understood the courage it took to speak so plainly, and Emma nodded slightly, letting her gaze convey all the reassurance words could not, letting him know that she saw him, fully and completely, and that she understood, because in that understanding, in that quiet acknowledgement, something shifted, a fragile tension giving way to a tender connection that didn't need labels yet, but promised meaning, depth, and intimacy, and Daniel exhaled, a small, relieved breath, as if some of the heaviness in his chest had lifted just enough to breathe more freely, and Emma felt her own shoulders relax, realizing that her heart was racing not with fear, but with recognition, with a thrill that came from knowing she was part of someone's emotional courage, that she mattered in ways she hadn't fully allowed herself to admit. He leaned back slightly, letting the words settle, and Emma noticed the subtle tremor in his hands, the way his shoulders slumped just enough to signal release, and she knew that he had carried this weight alone for too long, and she felt honored, moved, touched, that he had trusted her with such honesty, and the realization stirred something in her, a warmth, a longing, a quiet recognition that maybe this connection had always been waiting for acknowledgement, for courage to speak, for permission to exist openly, and now, in the morning light, it did, fragile and powerful, like the first delicate bloom of spring breaking through winter's grip. Daniel paused again, searching her face for signs, for any reaction, and Emma, keeping her voice gentle but firm, told him that she valued his honesty, that she appreciated him sharing what he felt, and that his courage mattered, because sometimes the simplest truth, spoken bravely, could change everything, could shift the weight of routine life into something meaningful, and Daniel's expression softened, a small, tentative smile forming, a flicker of hope in his eyes, and Emma felt her heart respond, quietly but strongly, with a resonance that made her realize just how much she had longed for this kind of connection, for this kind of vulnerability, for a moment where words could carry more than information, where they could carry emotion. And in that understanding, the kitchen seemed to glow with a quiet intimacy, a shared recognition of hearts meeting halfway, and she knew that no matter what happened next, this conversation had already changed something fundamental between them, had opened a door that could never truly be closed, a door to trust, to honesty, to connection, and Daniel, sensing her understanding, allowed himself to relax slightly, though the future remained uncertain, the distance looming, and yet, in that fragile, unspoken space between them, something began. Something tender, something real, a recognition that feelings, once acknowledged, could become something precious, and Emma felt the quiet thrill of possibility, the soft stirrings of hope, and a deep emotional resonance that left her heart racing, her chest warm, and her mind alive, knowing that some moments, some confessions, some truths shared quietly at a kitchen table on a seemingly ordinary morning, could mark the start of a journey neither of them fully understood yet, but both could feel deeply. And as Daniel finally set his mug down, meeting her eyes with a gaze full of trust, she understood that this was more than conversation, more than confession. It was a beginning, a tender, fragile, powerful beginning that carried all the weight of hope, longing, and the quiet, exhilarating uncertainty of love that dared not yet be named. And in that charged silence, Emma felt alive, connected, and profoundly aware that the morning had shifted, that the world had tilted slightly in their favor, and that their hearts, now lightly entwined by honesty and recognition, were poised on the edge of something unforgettable, waiting only for courage, time, and trust to grow into the story they both quietly knew was beginning. The morning sunlight poured through the kitchen window, bathing the room in a golden glow that seemed almost to highlight the fragile yet undeniable tension between Emma and Daniel as they sat across from each other, both still feeling the weight of what had been spoken, both aware that the words shared had shifted something deep inside. And now there was a quiet understanding, a delicate pause filled with possibility, where neither wanted to speak too soon but both were acutely conscious of the bond that had been acknowledged, the honesty that had bridged months, maybe years, of unspoken feelings. And Daniel finally straightened in his chair, a small, almost shy smile tugging at his lips, his eyes flicking toward hers as if silently asking for permission to leave without closing the door entirely on what had begun. And Emma felt her chest tighten with a mix of longing and hope, knowing that the next steps mattered, but not needing to define them yet, because this morning, this moment, was itself significant, a testament to courage, vulnerability, and human connection. He stood slowly, his movements careful, almost reverent, as if he were leaving behind more than just the room, leaving behind a piece of his heart, and Emma rose with him, walking him to the door, feeling the small brush of his hand against hers, the subtle electricity of contact that neither could ignore. And when she reached the door, she hesitated, searching his face for hints, for reassurance, for something that confirmed what she already knew, that what they shared was real, fragile, and waiting to grow. "I'm glad I came," he said quietly, voice low but steady, carrying the weight of truth and the relief of confession. And Emma felt a lump in her throat, a warm ache spreading through her chest, because those simple words carried so much more than meaning. They carried trust, courage, and the quiet acknowledgement that hearts could meet even in uncertainty. And she replied softly, her own voice trembling just enough to show her feelings without forcing them into words, "So am I." And in that exchange, in the simplicity of acknowledgement, something profound passed between them, a silent agreement that while life might take them in different directions, while the future might be uncertain, the honesty of the morning would remain etched in memory, alive in emotion, a spark that neither distance nor time could extinguish. Daniel lingered for a moment longer, reluctant to step away, and Emma noticed the way his shoulders seemed to relax ever so slightly, the tension in his eyes softening, and she realized that both of them had held their breath through the morning, had carried the weight of vulnerability and truth, and now, exhaling together in subtle synchronicity, they felt lighter, connected in a way that was both intimate and respectful, a bond that didn't need labels yet thrived on recognition and shared courage. And as he finally turned, taking a step toward the street, Emma watched him go, heart racing, mind alive with possibilities, feeling both the ache of impending distance and the thrill of new emotional beginnings, knowing that this morning had changed the rhythm of her life, had shifted her awareness of longing, connection, and the quiet power of love that waits patiently to be acknowledged. She closed the door softly behind him, lingering a moment with her hand resting on the frame, letting the echo of his presence settle into her chest, feeling the warmth of his honesty still lingering in the air. And she knew that she would replay the morning in her mind countless times, noticing details she hadn't fully seen before, the way he hesitated, the subtle tremor in his hands, the small flicker of hope in his eyes. All of it now magnified in significance, each movement, each glance, a testament to trust, courage, and connection. Emma walked back to the kitchen table, running a hand across the wood as if grounding herself, reflecting on how ordinary mornings had transformed into moments of revelation, how shared vulnerability could open doors to something neither time nor distance could diminish. And she understood that this wasn't about grand gestures or declarations, it was about presence, honesty, and the willingness to recognize emotions without fear, to honor them without rushing, to let something delicate and real unfold naturally. And as she sipped the cooling coffee, she felt a quiet thrill, a mixture of longing and calm certainty, knowing that her heart had opened in ways she hadn't realized were possible, and that the bond between them, acknowledged but unspoken, was a treasure she would carry with her, a memory wrapped in sunlight, trust, and potential. Outside, the street was waking slowly, children heading to school, neighbors beginning their routines, but Emma was aware of a different rhythm, a rhythm set by emotional truth and human connection, a beat that neither the mundane nor the ordinary could erase, and she realized that mornings like this, unexpected and heavy with feeling, had the power to shift everything, to illuminate what mattered, to show her that even quiet lives could hold profound emotional journeys, that hearts could meet and recognize each other without grand gestures, and that love, longing, and hope often began in small, intimate moments of honesty, courage, and shared vulnerability. And as she leaned against the counter, breathing deeply, she felt an unusual mixture of peace, excitement, and anticipation, knowing that Daniel's presence had left an indelible mark, that the morning had written a new chapter in both their lives, and that the path forward, though uncertain, was filled with potential, emotional richness, and the subtle thrill of connection. She thought about what she might say if he returned, about the courage it took to speak, about the gentle excitement of waiting without forcing outcomes, and about the quiet joy of knowing that sometimes the heart recognizes truths before the mind can name them, that some mornings carry beginnings disguised as endings, and that even a fleeting visit, a hesitant confession, a shared cup of coffee at a kitchen table, could be enough to shift the course of a life, to awaken emotions long dormant, to inspire hope, tenderness, and the gentle thrill of possibility. And as the wind rustled the maple leaves outside, brushing against the window, Emma felt the soft stirrings of longing, anticipation, and recognition that hearts, once brave enough to speak, could never truly forget, that connections forged in honesty and courage were resilient, and that the morning, with all its quiet intensity, had become a memory, a beginning, a promise, and a story of two people who had dared to be vulnerable, who had dared to acknowledge feelings, and who, in doing so, had opened a door to something real, delicate, and unforgettable, a story she would carry with her, that would linger in her chest, that would color her thoughts, her days, and her hopes, reminding her that love and connection often appear quietly, unexpectedly, and powerfully, and that the most profound beginnings sometimes arrive softly, at the kitchen table, with sunlight, coffee, and the courage to speak truth. And in that knowledge, Emma smiled, heart full, mind open, ready for whatever came next, and she understood that while the future remained uncertain, the morning had already given her something timeless, the awareness that some connections, once made, leave echoes that last forever, a delicate, enduring promise held in the spaces between words, gestures, and glances, a promise that love, in its gentlest and most powerful form, could survive distance, flourish quietly, and grow in unexpected, beautiful ways. And with that thought, she let herself breathe fully, feeling the warmth of hope, the thrill of possibility, and the quiet, profound joy of knowing that hearts, when brave enough to meet honestly, could create something unforgettable. And the morning, ordinary yet extraordinary, had become a turning point, a delicate, lasting story of trust, recognition, and the tender beginnings of something that neither Emma nor Daniel would ever forget.